The time has come for the Cobra to rise up and reveal himself.
Okay, so now, is it better to have an appreciated or depreciated currency? And in a true floating currency, because as we saw before, it is circular. On one hand, it will appreciate and then depreciate, and then when enough shifts one way, one currency, that appreciated currency will then become depreciated and vice versa, and then it'll result all over again. And one of the main drivers of that is, as we're going to see here, net exports and the balance of trade. So appreciated currency, what is good about that is really from the consumer perspective that the currency goes further in buying imports. And it also goes further for foreign direct investment, setting up shop in another nation's country that has a more depreciated currency. And it's better for in terms of the consumer for traveling, and it also reflects a strong economy. So unappreciated currency, good from the consumer perspective and good from the investor's perspective and wanting to set up shop in another country. However, an appreciated currency is bad for a nation because, as we see here, if consumers are importing more, imports are going to be greater than exports. So an appreciated currency tends to hurt the domestic businesses because imports are greater than exports. And in terms of balance of trade, very important key word, balance of trade, balance meaning that relationship of trade, it moves the balance of trade towards a deficit. That means we have more money leaving the country than coming into the country, just in terms of net exports. An appreciated currency also hurts the domestic tourist industry because people aren't going to want to go to, people will be discouraged from, will be less able and less willing to go to a nation in which it costs them more to buy $1 of another nation's currency. So for example, a great example of this is Greece was not the biggest fan of the euro because Greece is a very big tourist nation. Its number one business is tourism. And when it switched from the drachma to the euro, it went from a depreciated currency to a very strong currency. And this hurt Greece's tourist industry because now it cost, even though the selling point was, hey, now it's easier to go from one country to another and you don't have to do the exchanges in the Eurozone. Greece was like, well, they liked having a depreciated currency because it encouraged people to come to their country where their dollar, their $1 or £1 could buy one, or their franc could buy more, their $1 can buy more drachmas than, and so therefore having unappreciated currency actually hurt the Greece tourist industry. So appreciated currency good for consumers. We could buy more as consumers, but that's bad for domestic businesses because it moves the balance of trade toward a deficit. That's money leaving the country than coming into the country. Inversely, a depreciated currency is great for domestic businesses because exports will be greater than imports. $1 from another nation could buy more dollars in our nation, and therefore they will want to buy more of our products if we have a depreciated currency. So exports are greater than imports. It moves the balance of trade towards a surplus. That means more money is coming in than leaving. And this also helps FDI, it helps foreign direct investment because it's easier for businesses to set up shop in another country. If that country's currency is depreciated, one of their dollars could buy many more of the other nation's currency. And, as we just said inversely before, a depreciated currency helps tourism. That when a person from another nation is coming to be a tourist in Nation B, that Nation A's dollar can buy more of Nation B's dollars, and so their dollar can go further. They can have more fun as a tourist. They can buy more things. But a depreciated currency is bad because it hurts that nation's consumer. So very similarly, just like when we talked about also balance of trade in terms of governments limit trade, who's affected by it, we kind of see the flip end of households again. The household as the consumer likes an appreciated currency and dislikes a depreciated currency, but the business aspect of appreciated currency is bad and a depreciated currency is good. So it really depends on perspective, appreciated and depreciated currency. Depreciated is harder for citizens to import, harder for citizens to travel, and also harder for businesses to invest in other countries for foreign direct investment because they have to take more of their currency just to buy $1 of another currency. But over the course of time, the goal is it's a floating exchange rate as one currency, as the goods as one currency, as one nation demands goods from another nation, this nation becomes appreciated as this currency supplies itself. Now this nation becomes depreciated, and now nation B is appreciated against nation B's depreciated currency, and nation B can now buy nation A's product. So it's a floating exchange, and this constant float creates stability between both nations. On one hand, they're appreciated, on the next they're depreciated, and vice versa. But some nations, who remain nameless, would like to manage their exchange rate. Some may call this cheating. That's call it currency manipulation. They can use the power of their central bank to do one of three things, or three of three things. One, as we saw, the central banks can manipulate, first and foremost, they have the ability to manipulate interest rates, to consistently make their currency more or less in demand. And some nations, who will remain nameless, like to keep their currency depreciated because that is a constant influx of foreign money. So in order to keep their currency depreciated, central banks have the ability to buy and sell both their own currency and other nations' currency. So if we think back to our supply and demand charts, what can depreciate a currency in terms of each other? So what some nations might do is they could supply their own currency, they'll supply their own currency to push their currency down, and you also buy a foreign nation's currency to increase the demand for that nation's currency. So a nation that wants to actively depreciate its currency can sell its currency, can supply its currency, will sell its currency and supply its currency, and at the same time try to buy another nation's currency. So you have that it'll increase the supply of its own currency and also buy another nation's currency to increase the demand for that nation's currency. Again, this is called currency manipulation. This is done to purposefully depreciate their currency in terms of another nation's currency. And sometimes this is also asked on the AP test, so you just have to think about, draw the graph, when in doubt, strike first and graph it out. And it depends on the question. So sometimes the question, and it appears here and there on free responses, it'll say what can a nation do if it wants to either re-appreciate its currency or re-depreciate its currency based on the current situation. And you just have to graph it out based on what just happened. What should a nation do? Should it increase the supply of its currency, decrease the supply of its currency, or sell the foreign currency or buy the foreign currency? So depending on, but the central banks do have the ability to do that in what are called the treasury accounts, where they have access to all of this currency. So for the AP test, sometimes it'll ask you if a nation wants to appreciate the currency or depreciate the currency. When in doubt, strike first, graph it out, and then see what has to happen supply or demand-wise. Does it need to decrease the supply to increase the exchange rate, or increase the demand to increase the exchange rate to appreciate, or increase the supply to depreciate the exchange rate and increase the demand of the other currency, again, to depreciate in contrast. So I don't want to give you a general rule of thumb other than when in doubt, graph it out, because no matter what the test asks you, if you draw what's going on, what that nation should do, you will get that answer correct. Just asking you what based on what it wants to do to appreciate or depreciate, how should that nation, which it has the power to do, try to manipulate the different currencies by buying or selling its own, or buying and selling the other nation's currency. So just draw both graphs, and then you will get the answer for whatever you want to do. Again, this action is actually discouraged by the International Monetary Fund, but enforcement is difficult, and the floating exchange rate creates a stability between nations. So, this has been exchange rates. Remember, whether it is your mind, your money, or your body, invest hard, invest often, and no feelings. Money never sleeps. We'll see you next time.